I'm Debbie Gillian, for those of you who might be new, I'm the consumer horticulture agent here in the extension office. And I manage the Master Garden program, and so tonight you're in for a treat. We've got Sonia McElveen. How many years have you been a Master Gardener? 2007. So next year it will be 20 years she's been a Master Gardener.
Wow.
She grew up on a farm in South Carolina, so she learned from an early age about horticulture and gained an understanding of what it takes to be successful at growing things in different seasons. She moved to our area and continued to learn and adapt to unique Union County conditions. Any newbies here to Union County tonight? We get people all the time that move from other states and they don't understand our soils and different things. And so, you know, it's a learning process. Huh? What?
I said you mean a rock.
Your rock or your clay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, she continues to learn and she has a vast knowledge of plants and acquiring skills in the growing process. Sonia actively supports many areas of horticulture education in the local community by sharing her expertise and coordinating public events. So you're in for a treat tonight to learn from Sonia. She's got some props up here and she's got some nice slides. Anything else I should be saying about you, Sonia? She is very knowledgeable. She is a chemist by trade. So when it comes to chemistry, she really understands the chemistry things. So I'm going to turn it over to Sonia. Thank you, Sonia.
We're not getting into that tonight.
No.
That is the soil test is a class all in and of itself. But I did grow up on a farm in South Carolina, and it was more sandy. And we grew most of our stuff at least in the summertime to feed us for canning, for freezing, for whatnot by seed. The only thing that we bought transplant wise were the most finicky things that we planted in, maybe not acres, but pretty close, tomatoes and peppers. Because those are extremely finicky, or can be extremely finicky seeds to get to a transplant. And it goes through the winter and then comes up in the spring. That might need a cold or freeze off cycle in order to get it to break dormancy. And one thing to note, and I've seen it when you're planting, and I think I covered this a little bit more, but if you notice out in nature, nobody's going back behind those seeds when they fall and cover them up. But Mother Nature does do some of the covering herself with leaves and whatnot. So I've seen a general rule of thumb 3 to 4 times the thickness of the seed. I've also seen 1.5 to 2 times the diameter, and I'm like, okay, where am I measuring that diameter from? If it's a funky seed, you might have no clue what the 3 to 4 times is, but at least you'll have a general idea. You can guesstimate. Now, I realize that out in nature, there's not any sterile fresh soil out there. That's not how nature works. However, so for non-native or for native stuff, you might not have to worry about this nearly as much. But there are reasons why we do it in a greenhouse practice. If you have sterile fresh soil, and you can buy potting soil and seed starting mix, because keep in mind, seed starting mix and potting soil is 2 different things. For a fresh soil, for seed starting, it needs to be well drained and loose. It needs to be fine textured. Most of your potting soil has maybe pine bark or something in it. Well, if you think about that little chunk of pine bark, you got a little skinny that big, it's going to cover that up. If it covers up the top, you can end up blocking that seed and it'll never make it to the top of the soil. But another thing too is low fertility. You don't want any type of big box store brand that has fertilizer in the mix in order to do your seed start. One, it's a waste of money because you don't need it. But two, if it's overly fertilized, it could you could have the possibility of burning individual teeny tiny little roots when they start to put out. So you can overdo it. You can overdo it with fertilizer, you can overdo it with water, you can overdo it with a lot of things. But you just need to know when it's first started, the seed becomes perfect. It comes with everything it needs in order to germinate. And so that it'll have the food source that it needs in order to put up a little plant. Now, once it gets beyond the first cotyledons and the true leaves, yes, you most definitely can come back and fertilize. And we'll cover that a little bit more. Another thing, labels. How many of you label everything you plant? Good for you, because most everybody does not. But in the greenhouse, we label at the bare minimum, the name and the date. Now you can understand the name, you're going to want to know what's coming up, right? Because if you're planting 15 different varieties of tomatoes, when they come up, they're going to look pretty much the same across the board unless you've got a potato leaf variety. That one you can tell what the difference is. The rest of them are going to look all the same. And you will not know until they start bearing fruit which one the rest of them are. Which might be fine if you're growing your own, just for you. If you're trying to sell it as a better boy and it turns up as a Roma, somebody's going to be unhappy with you. So we at least put the name. And you don't have to so say you do one tray. You don't have to label each little cell in the tray. Or if you're doing 5 seeds in one pot, you can do one label. One label for that entire tray. And I usually tell people to do one label for the entire tray, because if that entire tray fails, then you've wasted all of those labels that you only needed one for. The date is for you. So say you've got a germination rate of 7 days. And at day 14, nothing's come up. And you're like, what did I do? Were the seeds bad? Did I plant them too deep? Did something get in there and squirrel around and take all my seeds? If it's gone way beyond when they should be coming up, then you have a choice to make. Do I replant? Or do I go down to the Master Garden sale and buy me the plant?
And what's that date?
I think it's the 24th. Whatever the Saturday is around the end of April. If you really need it after this, I can look it up. But you're going to have a decision to make. So you at least need to know the date. If you, unless you're one of these folks that has journals, I think I have one in here somewhere. You may write it down in a time, a date, what you planted in a journal, but it's just as easy to write it on the label. And then that way you'll know that that label goes to that pot. Now, pencils are your friend. And I tell you this because anybody will sell you those nice little black markers and say that they will last in the sun. No, they will not. But pencils will. You might not be able to read that thing from 5 feet away, but if you get up close to it, you can actually read it in pencil. And if you decide to replant those that didn't come up, you can always erase it and put a new date on it and reuse that label rather than having to create a new one. Let's see. And one thing too, that some of us are a little more inclined to remember than others, is whether or not, especially if you're dealing with native plants versus vegetable is common name versus Latin name. And when we sell or when we plant here, like for native seed, if we know it, we put the Latin name on. And the reason is what I see as, let's see, what's one of the most common ones that could be something different in Texas?
Aston.
Well, yes, there are lots of different varieties. Because the one that was coming to my mind is not politically the way I learned it is not, it's a Tradescantia, and the way I learned it is not something that you want to repeat. Therefore, if you learn the Latin name, that's safe across the board. But so what might be one name here is a common name. It's not may not be the same in Texas. And if that's the case, if you're communicating from somebody there and you're like, hey, can you send me some seeds of, and you give them the common name, what you get might not be what you thought you were going to. But if you lose the Latin name, which is everywhere, everybody knows, well, they don't. Everybody does not know that, but it's universal. I'll be honest, I may or may not know the Latin name for every plant we have out there. However, if I learned it initially as a Latin name, I may also not know what the common name is. So if I have transplanted it, if I have made cuttings from it, I am more apt to remember the Latin name than if it was just something that we bought and they put out there and didn't tell me what the Latin name was. Because that has been known to be the case occasionally. Now, fertilizer. So you planted all these nice little seeds, and they're coming up. And the little first ones, all of you know that the first little leaves that you see are not true leaves, correct? I figured you might, and I didn't necessarily have to go through the biology of it because, like she said, I'm a chemistry major. Biology was not my forte. Well, I had to do a dissertation for biology, and so I told them no. So I could have, but I didn't like public speaking. Look at me now. But fertilizer, whether or not you're going to use it, depends. If you're doing seeds and cuttings at the beginning, the answer is no. If you're doing transplants, there's that word again. It depends. And if yes, with what? Now, for us here, everything we transplant, when it gets moved up into a larger container, before we pull it out the door for the sale, generally gets a slow release fertilizer. And so that gives it a good jump for a long-term continual feeding. If it is something that you're wanting to get something of immediate impact, then you may need something that acts a little more instantaneous. So say you're wanting to, if you're selling plants for a living, and you're wanting to get it to put on a bunch of green growth so that it'll look better at the sale, then you may want to give it something a little more potent. So maybe slow release would be like a multivitamin, and the quick release might be a energy drink. That's about the closest real world application I can think about that right now. But that's generally what it is. The multivitamin may last a little bit longer, and then I don't know about you, but I've never had any energy drink, so they outlast what, half hour? Maybe. But they do the desired effect pretty quickly. And then too, whether or not you want to do synthetic or organic. Those are individual choices that are up to you to make based on your preference. How you want to grow your seeds, how you want to put your plants out there. I could tell you that I never grew anything that was not organic. That would be a lie. I was a kid in South Carolina in the 80s, and my parents, we used to use the little socks with the seven dust in it to go from seed to plant to plant to plant. I wouldn't use that on anything I'm eating now for anything because I know that. But if I go back down there, I guarantee you I have cousins that still do. It's a personal preference. I'm not doing it, but I can't tell you not to. And I would not tell you not to.
Someone in the audience is asking about worm castings.
A worm castings is perfect. It would give you some, I would think worm castings would be more of a slower release. I haven't done the research behind that, but I've also know that people have used worm castings to make a quote unquote tea, because it's not something that you're going to want to drink, but it is something that you could feed your plants to give a liquid version of that, but it would still be a lower, not as a high potency of a fertilizer. And it's not going to give you, and we'll cover that. I don't know exactly, all worm castings are not necessarily created equal, because I'm assuming that depending on what it's mixed in, if you're growing your own, then you know. But I don't think that they would always give you the same value as far as your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Each time it would be different from batch to batch. But it still would be on the lower end of the numbers and give you more of a slow release. I don't think it's a quick release. No. But I can double check that. Is there anybody in here that knows for sure?
It's a slow release. It would be a slow release.
I thought so, but I've never delved into the chemistry of worm casting. I know people that use it. If you're growing your worms, why not? And compost would be the same thing too. It would be a slower release and not necessarily a high potency type of fertilizer. And keep in mind too, along with that, it depends. More is not necessarily better. And by more, that can have different connotations. So say half a cup. Well, a half a cup of something that's a 13, 13, 13 is different than a half a cup of something that's 5, 3, 3. And those numbers on the end down there are things that by a large bin of soil or a small bin of soil, that's for the master gardeners in the group. And I forgot to take that part out of there. But when we have what looks like a large concrete tub, mixing tub that we put our soil in. And sometimes when we're doing things in mass, we actually put the fertilizer in the soil in the bin. If we're doing smaller quantities, then each little plant gets babied and it might get a pinch in here and there. But the NPK is the biggest thing that you need to look out for. So obviously, the larger the number, the higher potency it is. So if you are, and every time you see this, you're going to have this number. The first number is your nitrogen. Second one is your phosphorus. Third one is your potassium. Yeah, I know the K does not start with chemists in their names. But you can only have one P for phosphorus, so the potassium is on its own. But there is a rhyme or reason why, or not really a rhyme or reason, but there is a mnemonic way that you can remember what each of those is for. And the way it was taught to me is up, down, all around. So if you're looking for high foliage, quick hit on the greenery, then you're wanting a high nitrogen. If you are looking for something that is specifically for the root development, then you're looking for something for phosphorus. And then the potassium, that's a catch-all. It helps it all across the board. And now another thing with it depends. Know your plant. Some of them are heavy feeders. tomatoes are heavy feeders. Corn is a heavy feeder. They may need a higher nitrogen content or a higher phosphorus content, or it would be a higher number there than what you necessarily might need for something that's not as a heavy feeder. Or you may need, you could use a lower one, you may just have to feed more often. Now, another thing to note, if any of you not use plant tone or holly tone or any of the tones, because there's like 50 of them, and they all have a specific use. So, plant tone, if memory serves correctly, and I think I have this correct, if it's just for plants, it's a broad spectrum. If it says holly, you may want to stick with just your hollies for that. Or if it says, I think there might be one for tomatoes, there might be another one for blueberries, there might be another one for azaleas. Those are specific to the feeding requirements or the pH requirements for that particular plant. So that comes back to know your plants. What did you plant? What did you want to plant? What are you planning on eating it? And how long are you having to feed this? So say you fed the tomato up until August. Well, are you really going to continue feeding it after that when it's getting ready to dwindle off? Probably not. I wouldn't, but hey, that's just me. Water. And this is for seeds as well as for potted plants. When is enough enough? Know your plant. Know your pot. Know the soil type that you have in that pot as well as the pot itself. Because we didn't cover on this because in large depth, because you pretty much can plant in anything. However, if you plant in terracotta, those type of pots are going to wick the water away from the soil. So you may have to water them more often. However, if you have a succulent or some of your perennial herbs that don't mind drying out between watering, that terracotta might be perfect for them. But for the most part, if we're doing transplants of seed starts and vegetables, you're probably either doing little plastic pots, or maybe some peat pots for those of you that do a peat pot. But your best form of testing, all of us have it, is a touch test. Most of us have at least 5 on one hand. If not, I guess you can put your toes in there if you wanted, maybe more than 10. But you can touch test. You can touch the soil. Is the top wet? If the top's wet, don't worry about watering it that day. Is it dry, maybe a couple of inches down? Depending on what it is, you might want to water it. Or when's the next time you're going to be available to water? That's another thing that we have to keep in mind in the greenhouse as well, or out at our nursery. So say I've got someone scheduled to come in on Monday. Everything looks fine. It's half an inch down, it'd be fine. But nobody's going to be here until Friday. And it's supposed to be hot during the week. That doesn't happen, by the way. We don't go that long. But you need a visual regularly. You don't necessarily have to water it every day, but you at least need to check it. Seed starts and cuttings need to be moist, but not sopping wet. And the reason that now when we plant seeds, when we plant cuttings, when we do transplants, and I think I might have skipped that part because I don't think it's down here anywhere, and I did. And I mention it because a few weeks ago, we were doing some transplanting out at the greenhouse. And I mentioned to the volunteers that were out there that they needed to moisten the soil before they potted anything. And they were like, well, I never do that. And I'm like, well, please do, and let me tell you why. So any of that light soil, if it's potting soil, if it's seed starting mix, it is extremely dusty. So if you're in the greenhouse and you're playing with that stuff and the fans keep going, you're going to be inhaling all of that. And even for those of us, well, maybe for some of you that do not have allergy issues, that would still be a problem. For those of us that have allergy issues, it would be a very big problem. But that's not the only reason. That stuff is so nice, light and fluffy. When you go to water it, it's hydroscopic. No, hydrophobic. It's hydrophobic. I think that's the word I'm looking for. I'm like, let me go through the scientific Latin. Phobic. It's hydrophobic. It does not accept water readily. So it'll float. And what's going to happen to that seed? Well, if it's flat enough, like maybe a marigold, it might float to the top with it. But if it's a little more dense, it might go down to the bottom. And then now it's planted too deep. It eventually might get wet, but it's easier to wet and dampen the soil beforehand. And I don't mean that you need to be able to grip it in a ball and squeeze the water out of it. But it's more like a dark chocolatey brown type color. You want it at least damp. And it needs to be able to pack a little bit because you're going to pack a little bit beforehand before you put the seed in. And then you cover the seed. Because if not, when you pack it down after the fact, here you go again. You might be pushing it in too far. And to be honest, this type of training, this type of seed starting is something that's more or better associated with hands-on. So that I can bring you out into the greenhouse and show you what I mean rather than telling you. And that's something if there's interest that we can certainly do. But it's because it gives you not, some of us are visual learners, some of us are hands-on, some of us can hear. I don't do well with audio as well with audio tapes as or books as I do with the ones I hold in my hand. I was a library kid. I grew up with books, not podcasts and TV and radio. So we learn differently. And I think this is one of those things that would be easier to learn if you'd actually do hands-on. But you're still got to get out there and touch the field. And, you know, for those of you that may have irrigation systems, that's fine and dandy if that's the way you want to do it. I personally am of the old school that I like to walk through and touch and talk and check for pests and, you know, do the hands-on approach. Now, another thing, more is not necessarily better. I think we heard that a little bit earlier with fertilizer, correct? More is not necessarily better. Many plants are fine drying out in between water. Now, there is one thing that we did not touch on because seed starting is only the first step. Planting the seed is only the first step. The biggest issue I have found over the years is not necessarily whether or not you get that seed to come up. The biggest hurdle is getting it from when that seed comes up until when it's available to go out into the world. Whether you're selling it or you're planting it or whatever your next step is, there are a lot of different problems that can crop up between when you put that seed in the ground and when it comes up. Now, and it starts with, did it germinate? Well, maybe. Did you have the soil at the right temperature? Did you plant it too deep? Did you meet all of its needs? Did you do what was required for it to germinate or break dormancy? Or maybe your seed quality wasn't good. Seedlings are too long or spindly. Are they getting enough light? Or maybe they have too much domination with, or that might not be the correct word, but they are competing with what's right next door. Maybe you need to thin it. Are they wilted? And this is kind of funny because it says, are they wilted? Not enough water. Seedlings, leaves are yellow, and it's wilting. Well, it's wilting, it's not enough water. No, there's a caveat there. are your leaves yellow? If they're yellow and leafy or wilting, you may have too much water. White fuzz, mold, algae, too much water. Your soil smells weird or bad. Too much water. And you have a continuing theme there. Water, 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 water. Water is a problem with a lot of things. Seeds collapsing at the base of your stem. You may have damping off disease, and that is a common occurrence when you have seed starts in a greenhouse. And there are viruses that, so that's one of the reasons why you use sterile soil versus maybe some of the used potting soil that you've had from the previous year, or maybe something that's from out in nature, native soil. It's because some of them host viruses that may not affect what's out there in the real or in the regular world, but once you bring them in for a seed start, it could affect the stem of that seedling, and before you know it, you've lost it. And that is disheartening.
Is there anything to be done about that if it starts?
Yeah, yes, there is.
And repeat the question.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. The question was whether or not there's anything that can be done about the damping off disease. And yes, that could be a whole 15-minute lecture in and of itself, which is why I didn't delve too far into a lot of these common problems. But I will tell you, there is a slide pack from Matt Jones, who was a horticultural extension agent in Chatham County, and he actually covers that a little more in depth, but it comes down to water, 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 water. If you're using sterile soil, the best thing to do is to water from the bottom. If you water from the bottom, it wicks up. So the top has a tendency to dry off a little bit in between the time that you one watering cycle and the next watering cycle. And that little bit of time to dry off can help deter any of those soil-borne viruses. Now, I have noticed, and I didn't give it that I have done some experimentation in the greenhouse, because that's just what I do. And certain soil types do better, or certain brands may do a little better if you are watering from the top versus watering from the bottom. I do my best anytime our seed starts, we water from the bottom, and then that way we don't have nearly the issue. Where we have run into issues is our last one here, where we end up with seeds missing, or maybe the seedling heads are missing, is because we have rodents that come in and feast. And I have no control over them, because I can't put a cat in there because that will cut the plastic. And I have some master gardeners that would not be happy if I put a snake in there. And even if I did, I couldn't keep them in there because they're going to go where the food is. Once the food's gone, the snake's going to go away, and then the food's going to come back. There's nothing I can do about that, other than to plant a little bit more than what I normally would, so that I can feed me and feed them. And I'm okay with that, for the most part. Now, there is one thing, and I will take some questions because I think we're getting right about that time, but I wanted to let you know, and for those of you that master gardeners, you already know this, but we, man, it's not the right word. Yeah. We staff a grow line. It can be via email or phone. You have a gardening related question, you call in, leave a message, somebody will call you back. You've got something that looks a little weird growing, and the seedling is looking a little funny, take a picture. A clear picture, send it to our email. Somebody will take a look at it, do the research, and get back to you. Now, I've stood up here for not quite an hour now. I think we got a little late start, but extension, and not just our extension as in Union County, but North Carolina extension, Clemson extension, because I'm from South Carolina, gotta give them a plug. Virginia Tech, Georgia, all of these extension EDU type facilities around the US, and I mentioned those specifically because they're closer to your climate, have horticultural leaflets that they have done a tremendous amount of research that is specific to the type of seed that you may be wanting to start. For example, this one, I can't remember if this was the first one or not, and I tried to give, nope, I don't think I have that one printed out, but this actually gives you a link to it. So there's actually a Central North Carolina planting calendar. And I only give you a little snippet there to show you that how long from harvest for lettuce and leeks. It has several pages. It's that QR code that gives you information on days to harvest, distance between plants. It tells you, actually no, I do have this one. And it actually gives you, because I didn't cut the color part off, that's why I didn't recognize it. It gives you color coordinated as to when to plant, based on whether or not you are in Eastern North Carolina, Piedmont North Carolina, or Western North Carolina. Also, whether or not you're planting tubers or transplants, or maybe you've got seeds or crowns or buds. It breaks it down and gives you a map, a yearly map to tell you when you can plant it. And in certain instances, I've seen some that actually tell you not only when you can plant it, but when do you expect to harvest. Because there is a math behind it. And for some of you that may not want to do math, there's actually websites where you can plug it in and it'll tell you. This is when you need to start it indoors if you're wanting to start it indoors. This one doesn't do that, but they are out there. This one is a little simpler because it only covers vegetable planting table. And they've got it color coded, coordinated, but it also says Eastern, Piedmont, Western. And it does days to harvest, distance between plants. It's just a different setup.
What's the T versus the S under days to harvest?
Tuber. And at the bottom of the page, tuber, sometimes it's tuber, sometimes it's transplant. It just depends on who's doing the. But it actually, when you see the full page layout, it actually tells you what it means. Usually tubers are TU and T are transplants.
Got it, thanks.
And sure.
I'm looking at it right now, so maybe if I'm reading it right, if it says, oh my goodness, asparagus is an example, days to harvest, C equals 2 years. Crowns is C?
Crowns, yes.
So what does that mean?
So usually you.
Can you repeat the
question? Sorry, my apologies. The question was, we have someone in the room that had pulled it up on their nice little smartphone and was looking at it and had a question about the chart. One, they wanted to know what the C was, which is for asparagus, which is a crown. And if you come to our plant sale in February, I can show you what the crown is, and we can pull it up and show you. But it's
Is it the tip part of the root?
It's part of the little root system, and it's almost. Have you ever planted strawberries?
No.
So it's got a little piece that may stick up, and then down below it's got little roots that. So you have a mound, and then you're placing it over that little mound usually, so it spreads out, and then it's got a little piece that pops up.
Sure.
That's considered a crown. And I don't know what. Is there anything else? Asparagus does a crown. There's some other things.
strawberry?
Multi-stems is what it's. Yeah, I was like. Yeah, it's like fingers, but yeah. But you don't put it up this way, you put it down this way. I do know that.
Like a jellyfish.
Yeah, it does kind of look like a jellyfish. But the reason it tells you 2 years is because usually you plant it, and then you let it go. You don't harvest the first year. You only harvest to the second year.
Okay.
So it does have a long cycle of when you plant it to when you're supposed to start the harvest. Sometimes you might see, I think artichokes is a year, asparagus was 2.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. That's what makes it.
Because you had multiple, and I wanted to make sure I got them all
No, thank you.
to cover. Now, there's also a vegetable gardening, a beginner's guide. This QR code, and I don't think I have that one with me. Actually, it might be out in my car for a go box that I have. Which reminds me, if you're interested in micro seeds or microgreens, there is going to be a class, which is one of the go boxes out in my car still, at the Marshville Library, Valentine's Day. It's free. You don't have to register. You can just show up. Starts at 10, and we're going to be covering the ins and outs and hows and whatnot of microgreens and planting them in order for you to get leafy greens, or maybe not leafy greens, but green stuff year round, if you're so interested. But this one covers all of the beginner's guide for any type of vegetable. It's a little bit more in depth than just seeds, but as I mentioned, a lot, because we have such a long growing season here in North Carolina, South Carolina, a lot of things that you're eating in the summer, you can plant directly in the ground. You don't necessarily have to start them indoors. You can, but you don't have to. You can plant the seed right into the ground. And they will come up, I promise you, because it fed me and the rest of my family all through my childhood years, because for the most part, we plant directly into the ground. Let's see. That's it. Unless there's questions.
I got a question.
Yes, Ed.
Inoculants.
Inoculants, okay? You're wanting to know yes, no, maybe?
Yes, no, maybe.
It depends.
It depends. Give Sheila a gold star, because it does depend. Do you have to? No. Can you help some things out? Maybe.
It helped my clothes.
That would not necessarily for seed starting. That might be more for transplanting to give microbial growth, but so that you get the synergy between the plant and the ground. But to be honest, I don't know how much an inoculant costs because I've never bought any.
It's
But
expensive.
if it's something that's an annual, is that really something that you're wanting to spend money on? And for those of you that might not have heard, the question he was asking about using inoculants. For vegetables, for something I'm planting that's an annual, I probably wouldn't spend the money on. You don't have to.
Well, that's different.
Yeah.
This is something it's mostly you use on beans. If you're planting somewhere where beans had never been grown. If you
Oh,
go
you
to
mean
seed
like, are you
corn-
talking soybeans? So you're talking
No,
like beans
green
and
beans.
green beans?
Green beans,
Oh.
yeah. If you go to southern states, usually they have a bag, a small bag. You're talking more on a large scale, field scale.
Yeah.
But
Oh, okay.
usually they have smaller packages of inoculant that, especially if you're going somewhere where beans have never been grown before, it's supposed to help with that germination.
See, I thought it was there to inoculate it against the bacteria or.
I don't think.
No.
I don't believe so. I don't believe that's the way inoculates
No,
work.
it's supposed to.
It's more along the lines of, see, because beans are a little bit different in that they are nitrogen fixers. And the inoculant, the way you're making it sound, because I've, to the best of my knowledge, I've never planted a bean with inoculants. But that said, beans have been planted there before me and and long before that, so that we may not have needed it. But it sounds to me more along the lines of it's it's given a jump start to the synergy of the nitrogen fixing for that particular bean so that I don't know that for a fact. Remind me and I can look it up and we can delve into the chemistry of that if you would like. That's just not something I've ever delved into.
Sonia, I just looked it up. And it said, it helped with everything you just said, but also with the microbial, blah, 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 fungi. You know, just kind of jumpstarts like you guys have been saying.
Yeah.
Jumpstarts the seed. Yeah.
So yeah, I can see it might give a jump, but I don't know that it would do that for every seed. Is it just a bean?
Yeah, it's beans.
Yeah.
Maximizes yield and ensures strong nitrogen fixing nodules in the new or poor soil. So the nitrogen fixing nodules on the legume itself.
And I could see that being important if maybe it's something that was, so say you planted maybe tobacco in that area, or you planted corn in that area, or you've overdone some other crop that might not be beneficial to the soil. You might want to give the bean a jump start. But that would only be on large scale. I would not expect the regular homeowner to be using any type of inoculant. I saw a hand and I don't know who's first. Let's start at the front and go back.
Okay, most things I've done starting at my seed have done well.
Okay.
The exception, other than just doing in the ground, is peppers. Any suggestions on peppers for inside starting seeds?
And repeat the question.
Okay. So the question is, if you've got everything doing well by seed, planting in the ground, with the exception of peppers, are there any tricks to the trade? Short answer is yes. The most expedient one is to buy your peppers as transplants.
That's what I'm planning to do.
Now, that's not saying that you can't do them, you can't grow them for seed. But I will be honest with you. As someone who has planted peppers seeds year after year after year after year, and gotten mixed results year after year after year after year, peppers are finicky. They are extremely finicky. In that one, you definitely need a heat mat in order to do the seed starts with peppers. Because, and this was one of the, I didn't get the QR code for this one, but this one is from Oregon State University Extension Service. And they actually did research, which is near and dear to my heart, on the soil temperature conditions for vegetable seed germination. And it gives the crop what the minimum is, what the optimum range is, and at what point it gets too hot, you might as well not even grow. Peppers, their preferred minimum temperature for a pepper seed, 60 degrees. Their optimum, 85. So what that means is you're either going to invest in a heat mat, or your best bet is to buy peppers as transplants. Now I realize that affects the diversity and the amount of different types of peppers that you could grow. But without spending the money for a heat mat, which they're not that expensive, and you have the space for it, the heat mat's probably going to be the best bet for you there, because they're notoriously finicky. And two, make sure you're not getting it too deep. If memory serves correctly, for some of the pepper seeds, they're pretty small. And we've actually, over the years, have covered them with vermiculite rather than soil. One, it helps because it's lighter. It doesn't hold moisture on that top, because that helps that would help with the damping off issue too, with too much water. But it's a lighter it's lighter, fluffier, and even when it waters, it doesn't hold it, so it would separate a little bit better for that, plant to come up.
Sonia, can I just jump in lily split? For chili peppers, a couple things. One, start early. Second, heat mat. 3, always water from underneath with warm water. Heat your water, that'll heat that soil. There's an outstanding nursery in New Jersey, chilipepper.com. They carry about a bazillion varieties. And we have had fantastic luck from them every single year. Yeah, that helps.
And if you're doing pepper transplants, you don't wanna plant them too early because you want that soil to be 60 to 65 degrees
Yes.
before you do transplants. Otherwise, the pepper may survive, but it will never grow and produce.
You'll stunt the growth if you don't wait to plant it until the soil temperature is up above 65. So even if you get it, the seed to come up for it to germinate, and then you get it bigger, if you throw it out too early, like we are wont to do right around tax day, then you still may not have waited long enough for that pepper to be prolific and produce. There was another question back over here.
The expiration date on the seedling package.
It's a suggestion.
So
The expiration date or the expiration date, and the question was about the expiration date on your seed packet. And a lot of those say pack for 2025 or sell by a certain date. That is a suggestion because we all know that there are seed stores that seeds have been frozen for decades, if not hundreds of years, and still are viable. Now, what that means is the germination rate, a lot of times, this particular seed packet gives information, and sometimes, I don't see it on this one, but some of them will give a germination rate on there. So that means that those seeds have been tested for the amount that are expected to germinate. So if you got anywhere above 90%, you've got pretty good germination. Now, what happens after the first year, that rate may not be as high, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you won't get good germination, or that you can't use that seed at all. You may want to seed a little heavier. So if you're planting in a pot where you normally put 1 or 2 seeds, you might want to put 3 or 4. And so, like I said, it's such a suggestion. It's information that they have to put on the package to alert the consumer that, hey, this is when these seeds were put out there for purchase. And it also lets the retailer know too that if you're still buying it, if they've intermingled them, you'll know whether or not maybe that you might could talk the guy into a discount for that package because it's older. It doesn't mean it's not still viable. It doesn't mean it won't work for you. It just means that you may just have to use a few more seeds than what you would from earlier.
Also, NCSU has a nice little thing on their website. Will show you how to do a germination test. So if you have seeds that are over a couple of years old, there's a really simple germination test you can do, and that will give you an idea of how good that package is.
And where do you get that?
NCSU's got it first on their website. Just create on YouTube has got 30 videos on it. Just create on seed germination testing.
And for those of you that may not have been able to hear that online, I don't know if you could. YouTube, Google is your friend, and you can actually find a tutorial on how to test your seeds for their germination rate. NCSU actually has some tutorials out there as well. I will give a caveat that most of the time, actually, maybe not all the time, but most of the time, if it's something I'm trying to learn, when I plug in what I'm looking for, I put +edu on the end. And what that does is tells me that that's been research scientific based. Now, if I'm just trying to learn something on my own and I'm not planning on teaching that to anybody else, I might on some of those other little videos, and a lot of times it's like, I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then go back to the research base. But that's me. That's just the way I roll. But like I said, if you can also look at your local library.
Yes.
And by local library, what I really mean is Marshall Library. I had, luckily for me, I drive by through Marshall twice a day, 5 days a week if I'm going to work and not working from home. They're not open in the morning when I go by, but they're open in the afternoons when I go by. And that's where I got those 2 seed starting books. One of them is Starting and Saving Seeds, and the other one is just a seed starter's handbook. Or so if you're like me and prefer hard paper copy, I'm never ever going to get rid of paper. It's just not going to happen because I prefer that method. Then you can also go to the library. And I think library system, you can have it delivered to your personal branch too if you want. But I was lazy. I didn't want to wait for it. So I said, can you just call them and tell them I'm on my way and I'll come by and get it? And that's exactly what I did. They put it, I called them, they put it in a little home area and they had it ready for me when I walked in the door. Librarians are so efficient that way. And extremely helpful. In case you don't know, I love books. And librarians are my friends.
I wanted to give you the dates you were looking for.
Yes, ma'am.
Our tree, shrub, fruit tree sale
February 28th
is February.
is our tree
28th,
sale.
And then April 25th
I wasn't that
is
far.
our big plant sale.
So, thank you for that information. And I, for those of you that are online, and because I gave us a plug earlier and didn't give you dates, our tree sale is coming up on February the 28th. And we're actually going to have Parkwood Middle School FFA back again this year. They'll be selling trees as well. That information as far as what will be available should be going out on social media at some point in the near future. And April the 25th is our spring plant sale. That's where you might find some tomatoes and peppers and other veggie varieties that you might not want to start from seed. Are there any questions from the lines?
One about fertilizer, soaking grass to create fertilizer. Anything about that? Grass clippings.
Should be mostly nitrogen and you certainly don't want to use anything that's got herbicides on it.
Yeah, for seeds.
Okay.
Because
Would you say,
that would not be because when you do compost, you're wanting a mix of greens and browns. The greens, as it breaks down, sometimes if you're using green litter around plants and whatnot, sometimes as it breaks down, it can pull nutrients from the soil as well. So, but soaking it is another thing entirely. And I will be honest with you, no matter what anybody tells you, I do not know everything. I even know how to use an old school card catalog, and I can research for the best of them. So, if you want to send that note or send that question to our grow line, and I can go back here and give you that email. Send that question to our grow line and tell them to send it on to me. I can do the research for you. But it probably won't be until next week because this weekend's Super Bowl.
there you
I don't have no idea.
So I did want to say that talking from watering from the bottom, Sandy is doing a successful gardener program on wicking beds
Yes,
in April.
yes.
So
You got a date for that so that I can.
it's the first Thursday of April.
Yeah, the first
first Thursday, I think it's posted on the website as being the first, although I am
It's-
April Fool.
It's
That would
corrected.
be a Wednesday.
It's a-
Please come the Thursday, that's what's correct.
Okay, so if you are interested in watering from the bottom, Sandy will be talking wicking beds and hydroponics,
Just with.
or just wicking bed. Okay.
Oh, well.
And,
Sorry, done hydroponics.
I must have missed that one. For some
and
reason.
lots,
I visited our hydroponics. You talking? I don't remember that.
lots of thank yous online, Sonia. Lots of thank yous.
Oh, but in case you didn't hear, the first Thursday in April is when she's gonna talk wicking beds.
Yes.
Whatever that date is. Oh, yeah. Thank you all for coming out. Oh, you learned a lot. Welcome all.
It's nice to get out.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that is most definitely.
I like that, you know.
All of that. I didn't graduate. I didn't know it was my thing. That's all I need. Very well. It's just something here now. It's very well, anything else. I It's very great about that. Yes, the state of the same. Yeah, very well accepted. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Then I was it off, Let's see. Right now. Problem is. And if you're dead, I think you can say, I'll go with you.
I hope